I have a new friend for the year, as I'm sure you are aware or expecting. I hope you're expecting. Whoever was with us in the last year heard all about, week by week, Sava Kabbalah. And my new friend for the year is Rabbi Moshe Alshikh. And I'd like to just begin with a few biographical notes about the personality of Rabbi Moshe ben Chaim Alshikh. He was born in Adrianople, also called Hadrianople, named for the Emperor Hadrian originally, in the Ottoman Empire. It's now called Edirne, Turkey, in 1508. The name Al-Sheikh probably comes from the Arabic word sheikh, meaning nobleman, a person of prestige. It wasn't a nickname that he acquired, it was a family name. Probably it was a distinguished family, probably a family of important yichus and perhaps wealth also. Certainly he's known for his accomplishments in the rabbinic field. I've got a suspicion he may have come from a fairly well-to-do family, but others have suggested it just was the name of a certain town in Spain. Certainly the family did originate in Spain, and they left, that is to say his parents left when the Jews were expelled in 1492. But he lived all of his life within the Ottoman Empire, and he died sometime after 1593, probably in Damascus, although he is buried in Tzfat. You may have been to his kever in Tzfat. Actually, the monument states that he died in the 13th of Nisan in the year 1600, in the contemporary calendar 1600, but probably that's not quite precise. He probably died a few years before that. He grew up, as I said, in the Ottoman Empire, and he became a lifelong disciple of the famous Rav Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch and the Beis Yosef. And he went with Rav Yosef Karo to Salonika. And then from Salonika, he went with him to the land of Israel, and he settled in Tzfat. He was on the Beis Din with Rav Yosef Karo for many years, and he ultimately succeeded him as well. Of course, our interest and his fame rests on his Torah commentary, but he also was very active and very renowned, very much venerated for his standing in terms of halacha, in terms of halachic responsa, Talmud, and the like. But certainly his primary legacy is in his drush, and his commentary is very extensive. Apparently, he would devote Fridays, he would devote the daytime to halacha, the nighttime to Talmud, or maybe the other way around, and Fridays he would devote to the study of Chumash and Medrash and that sort of thing. And on Shabbos he would give a drasha week by week, and he was kind of urged to take on that role, which he occupied for many years. And his drashas were renowned and very popular. And eventually, of course, he did record them, and that has produced the book that we know of today, which is right here, if you can see it. It's called Alshikh al ha-Torah, and he's known as Alshikh ha-Kadosh. I just end my little intro with one observation. There are only a very small number of great rabbinic personalities of all time who are known as ha-Kadosh, the holy. I mean, a person can be called holy if he dies, lo aleinu, al kiddush Hashem. It's a great accomplishment, but it's often a tragic end. It means someone who's been martyred, but that's a kind of general designation. But for a person to be known as ha-Kadosh is something very special, very unusual. And there are three great Torah personalities. You hope you've heard of them all: Ari ha-Kadosh, Shlah ha-Kadosh, and Alshikh ha-Kadosh. They all made aliyah to the land of Israel. They were all born and lived much of their lives in Chutz La'aretz, in the diaspora, and they made their way to the land of Israel. They died in the land of Israel, and they have acquired that moniker, that sabrakui ha-Kadosh. And as I said, this is a very special and rare distinction. He was known for his piety and for his greatness and for his Torah leadership as well. Perhaps we'll have a chance, maybe as we go along week by week, to reflect on some of the aspects of his biographical background. Okay, without further ado, because I don't want to take up our Parasha time with too much biography, especially because I did speak about it for those who are at Kesher on Simchas Torah a bit as well. So I'd like to share with you, of course, you won't be surprised to learn that he has a lot to say on Parshas Bereishit. Nearly all of the Mefarshim do. And so I'd like to share with you, as we always do, selected insights. He asks a question about the second day. So we have the 6 days of creation. Hashem rested on the seventh. And each day, the Torah describes the stages in the creation that were accomplished and were featured day by day. Of course, initially, Vayhi Or, Es HaShemayim, Es HaAretz, and all of that. The second day, and each day, most days at least, it says, Vayashem Kitov, God saw that it was good. You probably remember that on the second day, it doesn't say that Hashem saw it was good. We don't find ki tov on the second day. We find that on the first day. We find that on the third day. In fact, we find it twice. On the third day, pa'amayim ki tov. Tuesday has a distinction of being the day about which the Torah says ki tov twice, but it doesn't say ki tov on the second day. So Rashi says the reason is that the second day there was division, and that is, the nature of the number 2 as opposed to 1. 1 suggests unity, solidarity, cohesion, harmony. 2 represents perhaps division, opposition, sectarianism, not necessarily strife, but it could lead to strife. If you have 1, you don't have strife. But if you've got 2, you have already the opportunity, the possibility of the breakdown of unity. That's what Rashi says. But the Medrash has a few other suggestions as to why it doesn't say ki tov on the second day. And the approach that Alshikh maintains is the principal reason that the Talmud, the Medrash advances, is that the accomplishment for the second day was incomplete. So if you've got the stone chumash or whatever chumash you have, look in chapter 1. I'm looking at Pasuk Tes, verse 9. It's page 4 in the stone chumash. Let the waters. I'm sorry, I've got it in too far. We want to look at Yom Sheni. Excuse me. Go back to Pasuk Vav. To separate between the water above and the water below. So Hashem does that, and there's a division: water higher, the water above the firmament, below the firmament, and then in Pasuk Ches, Vayikra Elokim l'rakia shamayim, v'hi erev v'hi boker yom sheni. It was morning, it was evening, it was morning, the second day. We have no expression of kitov. When we look at the next couple of verses describing the third day, let the waters gather together to one place. And the dry land will be visible. And it was so. And then right away, God saw that it was good. So here on the third day, it says God saw that it was good, kitov, regarding the completion of the process of the water, the let's say status of the water that's gathered together in certain places, and the dry land is revealed. Then the third day continues, and it says a second time kitov. So the third day, Tuesday, is gifted, is endowed with 2 expressions of kitov. The second day not. Says Alshikh, the reason he prefers, or he endorses, or he says the sages seem to favor the explanation that because the matter was incomplete, since the destiny of the water, the function of the water, the role of the water, the position of the water, the interaction of the water with dry land was not completed on the second day. So it's not right that the Torah should say kitov on a project that was still underway. A person can celebrate the completion of a project. He can judge that what he's done has been accomplished to his satisfaction once it's done. In the middle, if he hasn't finished it yet, it's not over till it's over. So it makes sense, therefore, why it doesn't say kitov, because Hashem still had more to do with the water on the third day. That's what the Medrash says. Asks Alshikh ha-Kadosh, why did Hashem not complete the process on the second day? Why did Hashem leave it over for the third day? I mean, according to that explanation, which I think we can agree is a logical one, but it just begs the question: why didn't Hashem complete his program for the water on the second day? Why was it left over for the third day? So he has a very beautiful and elegant drash, which I'd like to explore together. He says, he doesn't quote it explicitly, but he refers to the well-known Medrash. It's in Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer, also elsewhere, that the 6 days of creation correspond to the 6 millennia in which the world will endure. According to our tradition, just as there are 6 days of creation, and the seventh day is Shabbos, Hashem rested on the seventh day. There are 6 days of the week in which we endeavor and we seek to achieve our objectives in those days. And the seventh day is Shabbos. In a similar way, it is also a metaphor for the days of the world. That is to say, the world will endure as we know it for 6 millennia. So the 7th millennium is like Olam Haba. The 7th millennium is going to be the Yom Shekulo Shabbos, etc. As I said, Ramban develops this based on Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer. Much has been written about it, and Alshikh has his contribution to this subject as well. He says that the first day, therefore, represents the first Elef, the first millennium. So if we consider the Torah's account of the first millennium, it is a very checkered time. In the first millennium, we have the decline of man. Machisim uvaim, each generation quickly deteriorates. Already immediately, Cain and Abel didn't get along, the first fratricide. And we find that idolatry quickly becomes de rigueur, and we find the decline and the downward spiral, of course, ending, as we know, with the flood itself. So says my new friend Alshikh ha-Kadosh, he says that in the first on the first day, corresponding to the first millennium, Hashem saw that the human race is not faring very well. It's all going downhill. And he was even thinking that the water should just flood the world and should render the world incapable of producing any life, any human life altogether. He saw, however, that among the iniquitous and villainous personalities of the first millennium, there is someone called Hanoch. Hanoch was very righteous, and in the merit of Hanoch, so to speak, Hashem ensured that the water would not swamp or destroy the world, and he held the water back on the first day. On the second day, which is how we began our discussion this evening, so it says, Vayavdei, Hashem distinguished between the higher waters and the lower waters. Says Alshikh, we find in the biblical record that Hashem performed 2 extraordinary, miraculous, supernatural, and historic events with water. Of course, you know what I'm referring to. The first is the Mabul, the flood of Noach, and the second stupendous, spectacular spectacle with water was the splitting of the sea, Kriyas Yam Suf. So the first event of the Mabul took place in the second millennium, in the year 1656. 1656 in the calendar counting from the creation is when the flood took place. So on the second day, Hashem did not want to finish the crafting, so to speak, the water and the role of the water on the second day, because the second day is associated with the second millennium. And when it comes to water, in the second millennium, we've got the flood, the Mabul. So it wasn't right that Hashem should say Kitov regarding the water on the second day, since the second millennium is going to be characterized by the flood with the water. So therefore, it's not right to say Kitov regarding the water on the second day. Therefore, Hashem also did not complete his program for the water on the second day, but rather left it over to the third day. Because in the third millennium, as we mentioned already, we have the splitting of the sea. And there, just as it says in our Pasuk, in Pasuk Tes, verse 9, let the waters gather together to one place, v'seira'eh hayabasha, and the dry land will be visible. So similarly, at the time of the splitting of the sea, it says, Kened nozlim, that the waters like congealed as a pillar, v'seira'eh hayabasha, and the dry land was visible when the Jewish people crossed the sea as a result of the splitting of the sea. The dry land was visible. The waters were like retracted. So that corresponds to what it says here, let the waters gather into one place, v'seira'eh hayabasha. So that hints to what happened on the third day. That was what happened on the third day, which alludes to the third millennium, which is the splitting of the sea. So this is how he answers this initial question about why indeed Hashem did not complete the program for the water on the second day, because of this association, this metaphorical association of each day with a progressive millennium. So what else happened on the third day? So he says on the third day we have pre-osepri, that eitz pre-osepri, trees which produce fruit, and the land, the earth itself, which is verdant, which produces foliage and vegetation. So he says that this corresponds to the third millennium, in which the Beis Hamikdash was built at the end of the third millennium. Oh, just by the way, since we mentioned the date for the flood, so the splitting of the sea, I hope you remember that date, easy to remember, 2448. 2448 is when the Jewish people left Mitzrayim. The splitting of the sea was 2448. The building of the Beis Hamikdash was at near the end of the third millennium. So he says that the pre-eitz osepri, that the trees that were verdant and were producing fruit, this is an allusion to the Beis Hamikdash, and he has a drash in which he elaborates a bit further on that. But I want to move on, because we've already spoken about the third day, to what he tells us about the fourth day. So the fourth day is dominated. If you got the Stone Chumash, it's still on page 4, the last line. It's Pasuk Yudale. On the fourth day, Hashem says, let there be luminaries. So he says the luminaries in the heavens, the two luminaries correspond to the two Batei Mikdash that stood in the fourth millennium. The Beis Hamikdash was built at the end of the third millennium, but it endured mostly, that is to say, its functionality, which extended for 410 years, was primarily in the fourth millennium. Similarly, the second Beis Hamikdash also was built in the fourth millennium, and those are the Shtei Ma'oros, the two luminaries. If you notice, though, the word Ma'oros is spelled chaser. I'll tell you exactly what I mean. In Pasuk Yudale, V'yom Elokim Yihim Ma'oros. So the vav between the resh and the taf is absent. The Torah could have written it actually with two vavs, but at least the second vav it really should have. Ma'oros, it would normally certainly have the second vav. So it's written chaser in a deficient way, which hints to the fact that the second Beis Hamikdash was actually deficient in a number of ways, 5 ways relative to the first Beis Hamikdash. The miraculous nature of the first temple, this temple of Shlomo HaMelech that we described, by the way, in the Haftarah on the second day of Sukkot and further on Shmini Atzeres, that temple had miraculous features that were absent in the second Beis Hamikdash. So that's how he explains Ma'oros, which is in the plural, but it's defective because the second Beis Hamikdash was deficient in certain particular and notable ways relative to the first Beis Hamikdash, and that's how he explains associates the accomplishments of the fourth day with the fourth millennium. Well, the fifth day, so there it says Yishutzu Hamayim, and there it says that Hashem made the Taninim Hagedolim. He made the great like sea dragons or creatures that were menacing. It says in Pasuk Chaf Aleph, V'yivra Elokim es hataninim hagedolim. The art school people render it the great sea giants. Not exactly clear what it refers to, whether it's a mythical creature, the mythical Leviathan, who also makes an appearance on the Sukkot liturgy a little bit, or maybe a giant squid or something like that that have been known to even bring down whales and boats and that sort of thing. Not so much in modern times, but for a long time that was the case. But even if we say that we don't know what creature it refers to, it clearly describes some kind of large and menacing creature. So Alshikh suggests that this alludes to the suffering and the violence and the oppression that the Jewish people endured in the 5th millennium. He refers to Asar Haruge Malchus, to those great sages whose martyrdom is described in the liturgy on Yom Kippur. We read it in Musaf on Yom Kippur. We also refer to, by the way, on Tisha B'Av as well. And those 10 symbolize the whole generation, the Hadrianic persecution, a very dark era in Jewish history. But of course, there have been far too many such dark eras. And he says this characterizes the 5th day, which foreshadows or anticipates the suffering that the Jewish people will endure. And he says that the beginning of the 6th day doesn't get a whole lot better. And that's where he says on the 6th day, Nefesh chaya limina behema v'remes v'chaiso aretz, creatures, beasts of the field, and some ferocious and some predatory, and that sort of thing. And this again refers to the further suffering of the Jewish people. He was living, by the way, in the year we mentioned in the 16th century. The 6th millennium begins in the civil calendar in the year 1240. I'm not going to be pedantic about the exact year, but just to give you an idea of when the 6th millennium began. So the 6th millennium, beginning in 1240, also had, unfortunately, far too much suffering for the Jewish people. Although the First Crusade, Second Crusades were all in the previous millennium by our Jewish reckoning, but I think we can all recognize that there certainly is no century of Jewish life which has been free of persecution and suffering. So, and he himself, although he doesn't, from what I can see, doesn't seem to allude to it, but I'm sure he had in mind also the expulsion from Spain. Only a generation or two before he was writing, and certainly he and his contemporaries and his peers in Tzfat were all very keenly aware of the upheaval and the trauma of the expulsion from Spain. Probably he is alluding to that as well. That, he says, is the beginning of the 6th day, but things, I guess we could say, do take a turn for the better, because the main event on the 6th day, the main accomplishment, if it's not trivializing the process to use that word, the main accomplishment of the 6th day is the creation of man, of course. Man is created on the 6th day. Says Alshikh, of course, when it says that man was created on the 6th day, it alludes to the 6th millennium, which is the time, says Ramban, of Yemos HaMashiach. The 6th millennium is the era of the arrival of Mashiach. So Adam, who was created on the 6th day, anticipates Ben David, the Mashiach, who will be a descendant of David HaMelech, who will come in the 6th millennium, and therefore on the 6th day, Hashem created man corresponding to the 6th millennium. He says very beautifully, and I hope it's familiar to you from elsewhere. If not, then now's the time to make this discovery. There is a close association between Adam Harishon and David HaMelech. Alshikh says this clearly. He says, "Hu Adam Atzmo." King David is himself Adam, as is known, because Adam Harishon, Adam lived for 930 years. 930 years is pretty close to 1,000. And the rabbis say that he was destined to live for 1,000 years. And that's also based on a remez in the Pasuk, because it says Elef shanim be'einecha kiyomis malki yavor. That 1,000 years from God's point of view passes like a day. Or to put it differently, a day is like 1,000 years from God's perspective, which means that Adam, after the Chait, was destined to die on the day that he ate from the tree. That doesn't mean he's going to die right away. It means he's going to become immortal. But in a certain sense, we could also say that he did die on the day, because he's not only going to live for one day, God's kind of day, which is 1,000 years. So, according to that, I think someone may have his microphone on. If you could just turn it off, because it just will simplify it for all of us. Thank you. The equivalency of a day for Hashem is like 1,000 years for us. So if Adam was destined to die on the day he ate from the tree, then he will only live for 1,000 years. He won't be immortal. He'll live only for 1,000 years, because a day for God is 1,000 years for us. Of course, as we just said, he didn't live 1,000 years. He lived only 930 years. There's a famous medrash which says that Adam bequeathed 70 years of his life to another man, a descendant of his, who would live for only 70 years. And those were the 70 years that he borrowed, that he received as a gift from Adam. That person, of course, was David HaMelech, but there's more to that as well, because David HaMelech, according to this medrash, if you think about it, that Adam gave 70 years of his life. How long would David HaMelech, well, he never would have been HaMelech, how long would David have lived? Otherwise, the answer is he would not have lived at all. He would have been a stillborn, or he would have been miscarried. In other words, the soul of King David never would have endured in this world were it not for the gift of Adam Harishon. I'm elaborating on this perhaps a little bit more than I should, but I want to help you understand why Alshikh makes this definitive assertion in the Midrashic sense that David HaMelech is himself Adam Harishon. The Mefarshim say, the Kabbalistic sources I saw quoted say that Adam, Aleph Daled Mem, is Rosh Tevos Adam, David, Mashiach. They're all the same person. That King David came back as, Adam came back as a Gilgul in the person of King David. And of course, Mashiach is going to be Ben David, a descendant of David HaMelech. So therefore, Adam was created on the 6th day, corresponding to the 6th millennium, when his descendant, or maybe in the way we described it, maybe he himself will come back to redeem mankind once more. This is what Alshikh says about the 6 days of creation corresponding to the 6th millennia. Our time is almost up. Just wanted to end with something a little bit homiletical, or a little bit slight Musar component as well. Not that I'm trying to give Musar to anyone other than myself, but a beautiful idea, which he says regarding the tragedy, or the prelude to the tragedy of the first fratricide, when Cain killed Hevel. So these are two sons of Adam and Eve, and Cain is born first, Hevel is born second. Unfortunately, they don't get along. They have the whole world between them. They divide up the world, but they are still quarreling. And they bring an offering. And Cain brings an offering from the field. And Hevel brings an offering from the flock. Cain was working the land, so he brought an offering from his area of endeavor, from the field, from the vegetable yield. According to our tradition, it wasn't maybe the most glamorous or sought after vegetable product around. I don't know what kind of fruit you like, a mango or whatever you may enjoy. He didn't bring that. He just brought flax, which is just barely edible. But in any case, the Torah doesn't say exactly what he brought. Hevel brought from the flock. Okay, he was a shepherd, brought from the flock. Fair enough. The Torah says, as of course everyone knows, everyone on this year certainly knows, the Torah says that Hashem accepted the offering of Hevel, but spurned the offering of Cain, which led fratricide that we mentioned, where Cain killed Hevel, as is well known. Asks Alshikh, why is it that Hevel is praised, or putting it the other way, why is Cain denigrated for bringing from his field, from his area of endeavor? Hevel is celebrated, and Hashem accepted his offering. Why is the offering from the flock inherently superior to the korban, the offering from the field of Cain? So he says that ultimately a korban should be a surrogate for the man or the woman herself. When a person brings a korban, that's why it's best if it's a bal chai, something which is alive. Some people did kaparos. I can't say I'm one of them. I did kaparos with chickens in the old time religion, and part of it is the drama of seeing this fowl that meets a precipitous end through the knife of the shochet, and a person should think to himself, there but for the grace of God go I. Yom Kippur is the day of judgment, the sealing of the judgment. My future is sealed on Yom Kippur. So there is that certain dramatic encounter, and therefore a living animal is a much more compelling kind of offering. A person should put his invest something in his relationship with Hashem. Cain brought something of limited value, possibly something that was inferior, for which he had little use. Hevel brought something to Hashem in the korban, which he symbolically imagined himself on the altar. So this is hinted to in the words, V'hevel hivi gam hu. Hevel also brought. Hivi gam hu means he brought himself as well. Gam hu, he brought himself. He brought himself to the altar, so to speak. We're not talking here about an act of giving his life for God, but symbolically investing all that he has in his relationship with Hashem. So this is our initial foray into our studies of Alshikh. As I said earlier, you can probably hear it in my voice still, if you can't see it on my face, still maybe bearing the effects of great celebration on Simchas Torah and limited time to finish his Parasha on Bereishit of Alshikh. But in Bezat Hashem, we look forward to further studies in the days and weeks ahead. Just to sum up, as we like to do, he has an elegant drash correlating the 6 days of creation with the six millennia, and each day of creation is associated with the theme of that 1,000 years. And this is how he explains why it doesn't say Kitov on the second day, because the water was not yet complete. The project of the water was not yet complete. And the reason for that is that in the second millennium, water was responsible for drowning the world. And therefore, Hashem waited till the third day to mention Kitov twice, because on the third millennium, we have the splitting of the sea, where water has a much more positive role, a more, upbeat role to play in the drama of the Torah narrative. And then we've seen just now how Cain and Hevel hevi gam hu, he brought himself. And this is the way a person should approach Avodas Hashem. B'ezrat Hashem, as I said, we'll have the opportunity to study more together. Wish everybody Shabbat Shalom. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Enjoy Parshas Bereishit, and enjoy the opportunity that we have been granted to study together and to begin the Torah anew once more. I wish you good Shabbos, and hope the new year brings wonderful things for us all. All the best.